All right, welcome everybody. I'm Wes Warren. I'm here with Greg Stanley. We're from Whitehall Management. We're going to be talking about things doctors regret the most once they've got an associate and it kind of works out. And Greg, what would you say is the thing that they tend to regret the most when they do have an associate?
That's a good question. We're actually a part of what they regret in that we tend to end up getting looped into talking about this with them. They've made this mistake, and it's one of those things it's really hard to undo. This is a thing on TikTok. How do you unsee this? How do you unpay this? Well, we call it giving away the farm. They've given a percentage to associates. Maybe the first time they ran an ad, nobody responded. So they think of it softens them up till when they do get somebody that responds, they're willing to throw in more because they went so long without a response. They give a percentage. Let's face it, the percentage is not sustainable. Let me explain that because it's on a couple of fronts. One, it's going to cut into their bottom line. The chances of them netting the 15% that we always hold out as ideal becomes farther and farther out of sight. And the second thing is, a lot of times they bring in a part-time associate, or they quickly find out they need a second associate because they want to take more time off, or they want to produce more, whatever. The second associate will come in saying, oh, you learned the first time? Well, you're not going to learn on me. You paid him a percentage, you're going to pay me the same percentage. And so we end up having to live it out over and over again of giving away the farm. Can you describe, Wes, a little bit about what that actually means and translates to?
Oh, I think first off, yeah, when you have one associate and you try to hire another one and you want to like reverse the tracks and get down to below 30%, it's we see it all the time. It's nearly impossible. So all of a sudden you're just overpaying a bunch of associates, and it turns into a problem when the owner finally wants to really back down and not produce. It all seems to work, and it kind of works when the owner is still leaning in and really driving extra profit and to the bottom line. But when they really start to pull back, that's when kind of it reveals the error in such a magnitude that it just won't work. The profitability is too thin. We can't add the marketing we need to support it. It creates all kinds of problems.
I'd like to just weigh in on this. Somebody back at school, a professor, other students, somebody told them they should ask for 40 or 50% or some
Right.
just unimaginably high number. And so then they think, well, okay, I won't do 40, but I'll do 35. You're still out of line. You've got to be able to end up with 15% net when this is over, or it'll be like Wes said, you're never getting out of here.
It's tough to get 15% when you're paying an associate below 30%. So a lot of times when you start off with a purely associate practice, you start at 9 or 10% and you're working your way to 15. So imagine, being 5% where you're running so close to being negative when you're first starting off that it's scary.
Tell you what happens when you run too close to negative. You have 2 or 3 months at 8% profit, and then a bad month, and you literally give it back. You give back what you made.
I
So
was just on the phone with a doctor today that's actually living this problem. He's paying exactly 35%, and he has not picked up a handpiece for about a year and a half or so. And they were doing all right, but like I said, the margin just wasn't right. And he called me and he's like, I'm putting money in now. I just put in 20 grand, and we talked through it, and it all comes down to overpaying the associate. That's essentially the problem. You can't survive the bad month. When you have a couple bad months, all of a sudden you're going to have to put in, and you don't want to be in that situation.
let's talk a little about what you can do to keep that percentage manageable. I would say number one is having the ability to deliver a substantial number of new patients in a timely way. I mean, the doctor's here, we open the floodgate, here comes the new patients. That's a doctor who says, okay, this is an opportunity. See, a lot of associates mistakenly think the opportunity is in how high their percentage is. But if I don't care if they have 80%, if they don't have any new patients, it's not an opportunity. So
Right.
a lot of offices that can deliver large numbers of new patients to associates and give them a team that can help them produce well off that, they can do 20 or 25%. And the ones that do higher may even subtract for labs or so forth. This is a fluid number, but if you let it get away from you, it will haunt you, because somebody will hear that you were paying an associate who's not even there anymore, paying a high number. And while you were working there, like you said, it kind of worked, but not without you there.
I also hear rationale of why, where, I'm already covering all my costs. I've already paid for the building, paid for some of the most of the marketing. I've already got a front desk team. I already got the equipment. So, and so I'm just adding this. So those percentages you're talking about, yeah, this is different because it's added income. It just hasn't played out that way. When we look at P&Ls and everything, it's the overhead just tracks right with the associate, like it was your practice, your side of the practice. It does not, for whatever reason, the whole efficiencies argument doesn't play out in the P&Ls.
When you're
And believe
dating,
me, we look at P&Ls, that's what we do.
when you're dating somebody, you say two can live as cheaply as one. It's really not true.
It's not true. It doesn't work out that way.
In an office too, Wes, I found that if you give an associate a real opportunity, not just new patients, but the staff that it takes to develop them, the space that it takes to have the staff, when you do all that, it's a same cost per square foot to deliver as you spend.
Well,
Maybe
I would argue it's a little more, because they're inefficient. So anytime we look at a doctor's numbers versus the owners always come out better on case acceptance, hourly production, all that kind of stuff, which obviously drives down overhead. So the associate comes in and underperforms a little bit, and that's where it creates this overhead pinch that you really have to be aware of. And this is why we're warning you, do not get out of the bounds of being above the 30% is the maximum.
I'll go one more step, and that is there's something in us. This comes from the guy that talked about influence, the book
Art of Persuasion. Yeah.
The Art of Persuasion. He said when somebody asks for 35, it's natural to offer 30 or 32, when in truth you were thinking 25. Because somebody asks you, don't let that skew what you can do. You have to jump in very quickly. It's like when a patient calls you and says, are you in my insurance? If you don't know how to answer that in about 3 sentences and do it right with power, they don't come in. With associates, you got to come back very quickly with, you're going to see, not about the percentage. We'll give you all the percentage you want, unless you get new patients to go with that and a staff to help you develop them. It's a waste. You'll not make any money.
Yeah. I think you're right.
Yeah.
They push for 28% or 25%, or they'll talk about a buddy. The 3 of my people that graduated, they're all getting 28%. So I was thinking 28%, and you feel bad. And so you kind of go, okay, 33%. Do not violate this rule. You've got to stick with your guns here. Stay within 25 to 30%, period.
You got to deliver opportunity, which you really need to understand opportunity. You need to be able to boil it down. It's numbers of quality new patients, probably, some good Google reviews. It's staff that know how to do the selling. That's 80% of our staff do the selling anyway. And number three, it's training that you can lend, oversight, and training from people like Wes and I can do to develop them as case presenters.
If you've got an opportunity where you can pop an associate in and they can produce 60, 70,000 a month, yeah, you only have to pay 25%. And you should stick with that. But if the opportunity is a little weaker than that, then you're going to be having to be at near 30%. But do not go above 30%.
Honestly, it is possible to not be ready for an associate. You can be
Sure.
old enough to need one, but it doesn't make your practice ready to deliver opportunity to a young associate.
Yeah, and that's one thing that we really try to make sure is that the practice is ready, it has enough opportunity so that when the associate lands, they're ready and capable of producing. And if you miss that, um, the associate's not going to last long anyways, because they're just not going to produce. And you're going to feel all this pressure to feed them business that you should be doing. And it just is that disaster. And so how do you get them to accept, Greg, 25%?
Well, it's always
When
easier. It's easier if you have somebody, associate who either did or is now enjoying a $350,000 a year income off of 25%. It's easier. I had a doctor in the East was able to pay an associate $100,000 a year and 10% of production because he's doing these giant implant cases. And the associate was as happy as he could be, but it was a special opportunity they were delivering.
Right.
So if you've worked all your life to create a great staff, a great referral following, you know how to market, you're ready. But I'd say that Wes and I probably spend as much of our time getting practices ready to refer, or excuse me, getting them ready for associates as we do developing associates in the practice.
Yeah, right. You've got to know your opportunity, what exactly the expectation of an associate landing in your practice should be producing. And that would be how many hygiene checks, how many new patients you're anticipating them seeing per month, how much access do they have to operatories and space. Really dictates how much potential there is. And once you know that number, you can really figure out what you should be paying them. If there's a lot of opportunity, yeah, 25%. And to get them to accept that, typically we have to pay a larger guarantee, but we know that they're going to eclipse that guarantee because of this opportunity that's there. And quite frankly, if they don't, you got to let them go anyways. Those are kind of some of the things we look at and try to figure out the opportunity. What's there? What should an associate produce?
In fact, I'd go as far as to saying that either Wes or I can look at a practice and tell within 10 or 15 minutes or 30 minutes at the most,
Yeah.
if they're strong enough. You know, a lot of practices, they just hinge too heavily on the owner. And it's all referral and it's all great until you bring in the second doctor. Now, if that doctor, that owner needs ongoing revenue, even as he or she ages, you're going to need to look down this path.
Yeah, if it hinges all on you and you have a thin patient base that you're riding off of and you're doing well, that's a challenge. That practice needs to ramp up its patient base. So there's usually on those scenarios, there's a good 6, 7, 8 months of patient ramp up first that we do before we even look for an associate. I would say that's fairly rare nowadays. It's only maybe 20% of the clients that we deal with that end up in that scenario. Most of us, we can get within 2 or 3 months up to speed and looking for an associate pretty quickly.
Especially when staff know that the odds are pretty good you're going to slow way down. They don't want to see their income slow down. So the idea of bringing in an associate, they're usually open to getting better at what they do, to being stronger as a staff.
Yeah, a lot of people worry about, bringing consultants in or changes or doing things like that. With this one, when we're dealing with offices that know that the owner is, but they still like working there, working for him, and would love for that to continue. Man, they're willing to do just about anything.
It's
Uh,
funny too, because we really see them stepping up in a big
Yeah.
way
yeah,
and being the person we never thought they could even be. So open your mind to that possibility.
yeah.
If you are interested, this is what Wes and I do. If you would like us to sit down and talk with you about your prospects of whether you would make it in the associate world, or if not, what you'd have to do well with associates, give us a call.
Yeah, like Greg said, within 15-20 minutes of talking with you, learning your numbers, we could tell you kind of where you're at and how you stand and what kind of opportunity you have for an associate, and tell you, what percentage you should be looking to pay them, and maybe even the guarantee. So yeah, if you're interested in that, jump on the link, schedule a call with Greg and myself, and we'll walk you through it and try to help you out. Absolutely no charge, no commitment.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll help you through that, no problem.